Thanks for checking out this video. So this is the kickoff for the 1990s horror movie superlative series that I'm doing with your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete. And if you don't know about this, we already did the series for the 70s and the 80s. Well, we did the 80s first and then we did the 70s. And now we're on to the 90s because this was our second most voted one after the 70s. And obviously that one's ticked off. So let me remind people of some of the rules here. Make sure you watch my video with all of my picks. Make sure you watch Uncle Pete's video with all of his picks. His channel will be linked in my description, so it's very easy to get over there. Do us a favor and subscribe and hit the notification bell button for both of our channels because we do really good work. I'm a little biased, though. And then come back to my channel, go to the community tab, and vote on whose pick you liked for each of the years that we're doing. One of the big rules with this for us was it can only be films that we've seen. So there may be picks out there that you're like, oh man, this would be an obvious pick, but I didn't pick it. It's possible I have not seen it. And you can ask me about that in the comments. We also encourage people to get involved with this from a comment standpoint. Put your picks down here. Love to see other people's picks because obviously these are opinions and everyone's got different opinions on these things. So without further ado, because I think I hit everything, let's get into my picks for 1990. Oh, and first I do want to say, a lot of people kind of make the comment that the 90s was like a wasteland when it comes to horror films. Maybe in comparison to like when you look at all the great stuff from the 80s or the 70s, but not really when you start like actually digging into the films from that decade. And also, there's a lot of stuff I've ended up finding that I've never even heard about that's actually pretty solid that I think maybe should start to be getting talked about. But anyway, my picks. So starting off with the most amazing, if people know some of my fandoms, you're probably not going to be surprised. It's got to be Tremors. The original Tremors, the film that kicked off a 7-film franchise and a TV show that was on Sci-Fi Channel, and I have it on DVD. I own all the Tremors stuff. As far as films and TV show go, but it is phenomenal. It is so much fun. This is the perfect, like, fun horror film. Obviously, Kevin Bacon's the big name in it, but everyone is there mainly for Michael Gross as Burt Gummer, who's in every single film and the TV show, and that's what matters. He is amazing. He's just a badass tremor killer, or, well, graboid killer, as they're actually called in there, but it's basically about a very small western town that has been besieged by they don't look like this in the first film, but things kind of like this called graboids that are underneath the ground that are very much like the sandworms from Beetlejuice, and they pop up and eat people, and it's activated off of the vibrations that they feel on the ground. So it's got that kind of like danger action element to it. You're wondering, where did these freaking Tremors come from? And they evolve over the franchise, which is awesome. They have a bunch of different stages, but this is the film, the first Tremors, that kicked it all off. And it is so well done. There are funny moments to it. There are intense moments to it. There are badass moments to it, mainly with Burt Gummer, but it is just such a fun film. I think it's so well done. And again, excuse me, it kicked off a wonderful franchise that I highly encourage people to check out. So my most amazing film for 1990, Tremors. I don't own all these, by the way, for visual aids, but I do own the next two, actually, and that's it. The best So Bad It's Good film. This was an easy pick. This is a very easy pick. That is Troll 2. Obviously, this is a DVD with Troll and Troll 2. The original Troll, not a bad film, actually. Kind of fun, kind of interesting, but Troll 2, fun in a different way. This literally is the film that put the idea of So Bad It's Good on the map. There's literally a documentary about it called The Best Worst Movie Ever Made by the person who starred in it as the kid. And it's a great documentary. You should definitely check it out. But make sure first you check out actually Troll 2. I don't even know if I can really tell you what Troll 2 is about because it's so like nonsensical, ridiculous. But the guy who was the filmmaker for it actually believed he was making a good film, and to this day, he holds that it's actually a good film, and people don't know what they're talking about as far as it being so bad it's good. It is so hilarious. It's literally about these trolls that are in this town, and they turn people into plants in order to eat them because they're vegetarians. It feels like they're just taking way too many steps, but the acting is terrible. There's just ridiculous lines. The practical effects look ridiculous. When people are like oozing green blood, it's ridiculous. Just so many weird choices all the way through the film, but it makes you laugh and it's so much fun. It's such a great film to watch with friends and just laugh at and make fun of. Man, Troll 2, like I said, it started the whole thing, so I have to pick it as my best so bad it's good for 1990. And this will be a strong contender for the whole decade, to be honest. Just saying. So my best so bad it's good is Troll 2. Man, I'm just thinking about some scenes. I got to rewatch that. All right, now going to my most WTF pick, and that is going to be, also could be a so bad it's good, Demon Wind. Most people heard and found out about Demon Wind from Joe Bob Briggs on The Last Drive-In. That's where I found out about it too. I love that episode, by the way. It was hilarious hearing his commentary on it. This film is wild. It is so out there. It doesn't make any sense. You never know where it's going because everything is like left field. There's a magician who's a ninja at the same time. Like a magician, he just does martial arts. The acting's terrible, as you would assume, and just the mix of like horror related stuff that gets thrown in, there are like no rules to the evil that exists here. Like they throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at this film, and it's so ridiculous and it's horribly acted and it just looks ridiculous. There's not really much of any story to it. I can't really tell you any. It's literally about some people who find themselves at like this cursed cabin and then they're stuck there fighting all this evil. And like I said, you never know what's going to happen with this film. So if you've never seen Demon Wind, it is a must. It's totally WTF. The whole time you're just going to be like, what? It's awesome. I love this film, obviously, so much that I purchased the Blu-ray, which I think this is Vinegar Syndrome. Yes, Vinegar Syndrome. They put out so many good things. But my most WTF for 1990, Demon Wind. Now, I don't have any more visual aids going forward, so let's go to the best gore. I think this is a pretty easy pick. It's got to be Bride of Reanimator. The sequel to Reanimator, where thankfully we get Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West again, showing up and doing his thing with his glowing green serum, reanimating things. The gore is amazing in this. Not only do the body parts that are used to cobble things together and The Bride of Reanimator, which is obviously a play off of Bride of Frankenstein, they look so real. And it's so in-depth, and it's so gruesome, and there's lots of blood. Blood, sinew, muscle, bone, viscera, guts, just all of it. It's so well done, and there's so much of it in the film, too. One of my favorite things, and probably a lot of people, the creature that he reanimates and creates, which is a bunch of fingers that are cobbled together with an eyeball in the center. And the way that thing, like, moves around, it looks like it was stop motion the way it was done. And it's just so funny and fun and cool. And that's the thing with the film. Much like the first Reanimator, it has a comedic element to it, but it is so hard on gore. And I think it's interesting because adding comedy to something like that kind of makes the gore feel a little more light and fun, which is a very interesting thing. But that's why my pick for best score for 1990, Bride of Reanimator. Most unique film. This is a pretty easy one as well. Based off a Clive Barker book and directed by Clive Barker, Nightbreed, which I think the book was called Cabal, which I have not read, but I really do want to. This is very unique in the sense that it's one story, it's basically two stories put together. It's the story of this place called Midian that has all these weird kind of living underground creatures with very interesting design to them in the film, who are away from society, and then, you know, people show up and start messing with them, and then there's lots of death and everything going on. And there's a man who finds himself going to Midian for certain reasons. I don't want to ruin it too much if people haven't seen it before. But it's that story plus a slasher film put into it with David Cronenberg in the film. And it's weird because David Cronenberg doesn't act a whole lot, and the last time I saw him act was in a season of Slasher, which I don't think he did a very good job at all. He's good in Nightbreed, and Nightbreed's kind of a crazy film. You never really know where it's going, and it's interesting. The director's cut is where it's at. Do not watch the regular cut because it makes less sense. It's not nearly as interesting or fun, so I highly recommend the director's cut of Nightbreed, but it's a super unique film. Never seen anything like it. But that's, that's Clive Barker. Like, that's what Clive Barker does. So that's why my most unique pick for 1990, Nightbreed. Now my most overrated. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I'm going to say it. The Exorcist 3. Yes, I know. Brad Dourif's performance in it is amazing. It is. He does a phenomenal job in the film. It's literally about a detective who's finding these deaths that seem to be, linked to this serial killer who's dead. And that leads him to interviewing Brad Dourif's character, who's at a insane asylum, basically. Or I think it's like a criminally insane asylum. And there's a possession aspect because it's Exorcist, obviously. So it's interesting, kind of, but the reason I say it's overrated is because there's been a huge fandom that's popped up around it, and I think a lot of that has to do with Joe Bob Briggs having it on his show. But I was seeing people loving it prior to that. It's a slow movie. It moves so slowly. It's mainly dialogue driven. It does have one of the best jump scares ever. There's an amazing jump scare in it. And like I said, Brad Dourif does an amazing job. I'm not saying that it's a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. I just think it's overrated for what it actually is. There's a decent story to it too, but the problem is the pacing is horrible. It is so slow. It is mainly dialogue driven, and it's just not that interesting. Obviously, this is a personal pick, but for all those reasons, I'm picking most overrated for 1990 as The Exorcist 3. Now that leads me to the most underrated. I'm sure a lot of people have not seen this before. I believe the first time I saw it, it was on Shudder, but that was many years ago. I hope it comes back because I would host a watch party for this one. It is nuts. The Reflecting Skin. Now, it stars Viggo Mortensen. Well, it doesn't star him. Viggo Mortensen is in it. Younger Viggo Mortensen. And it's basically about a 1950s town in, like, the West. Well, like, Midwest. That's basically, like fields of grain, like all over the place. So there's a lot of space there. And it's about primarily a kid who lives there who thinks one of his neighbors, which, the houses aren't that close in that situation, but he thinks one of his neighbors is actually a vampire. And there have been people kind of disappearing within their town or city or whatever it is. And he's thinking that that's what it's attributable to. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, what is actually going on here? Is this person a vampire, or is there something else at play? It's a very interesting film that has so many layers to it. There's so much metaphor and subtext within this film that you have to watch it a few times for sure. I haven't fully reviewed it before, but eventually I will. And when I do, that's going to be a dense one. It is a beautifully shot film. It is wild. There are some really crazy things that happen, and you're going to be like, what? I could even see someone picking this as the most WTF film of 1990, but I think ultimately it's a very good film, especially because the acting is really good. It's shot really well. It's an interesting, compelling story, and like I said, there's so much metaphor and subtext at play here that is so good. So for all those reasons, my most underrated pick is The Reflecting Skin. If you can find it somewhere and watch it, definitely watch it. It is so worth it. So yeah, those are all my picks. Like I said, go check out your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's, whose channel's linked in the description. Like I said before, subscribe and hit the notification bell for both of us. Hopefully you'll vote for me, but also just vote for who you think had the best picks. Or however you feel like voting, honestly. But anyway, I've been having fun with these series. I'm very excited to get it deep into the 90s and see what everyone else thinks about this stuff. But thank you so much for taking your time to watch this. And until next time, keep it brutal.